to Refuge Centres. Today we have two guests, Scott Scara and Warner Mendenhall, and they're here to talk about the wrongful death civil case of Grace Schara, who is Scott Scara's daughter. And Warner Mendenhall is the lawyer representing Scott Scara. At the moment, the case is the estate of Grace Schara versus Ascension Health. So
Yep.
I might start with Warner, if you want to just briefly explain what the case is.
Yeah, basically the case, it's actually very unique in a couple of ways. First of all, it is the first hospital protocol case under the COVID crisis to go to jury trial. So that's very unique in that. And the second thing is it's not just a medical malpractice case, it's a battery case. That means that they provided drugs to Grace Schara without permission, without consent, without information as to what they would do. And the combination of drugs is what killed her in the end. So they're a very, very unique case. There's very few battery cases against doctors and hospitals. This is one of the few, probably there hadn't been one in Wisconsin in the last 3 decades. So it's a very, it's a unique case in so many ways. And, Grace was a 19-year-old Down syndrome child who, when she went into the hospital, needed family around her. And this case really is about family and the need for family to be around the people who are ill so that they can heal and so that they can be protected from the really bad behavior by the healthcare providers as well. Because, families care about family members and they make sure that they're not being mistreated in those hospitals. And part of the case is about the hospital throwing Scott out. They brought security in and removed him from the hospital. They wouldn't let Grace's sister come into the hospital, and she has power of attorney for healthcare. They wouldn't let her come in. So there's all kinds of issues, a lot of ethical violations, that we're going to address in this trial. And today we had a hearing about whether we get to go to trial. So the first part of it was, do we get to go to trial? It's called summary judgment. We could have lost on summary judgment and not gone to trial on June 2nd. We're set for June 2nd.
Oh, congratulations. So you're set.
Yeah, no, we're going to trial June 2nd. It's going to be about a 2.5 to 3 week trial. So it's going to be a big deal. And then the second thing is there's challenges to our experts. They're always trying to knock our experts out of these cases. The experts survived in the United States. It's called a Daubert Challenge. We won the Daubert Challenge as well. So very good day today. The judge was very respectful of all parties, heard extensive arguments, literally all day long. And we have another day tomorrow. So we literally went about 8.5, 9 hours today. The judge listened to all sides, took everything into account, and set us up for trial on June 2nd. Now, tomorrow's hearings are about the scope of the evidence. So there's objections to some of the evidence we want to put in. We have objections to some of their evidence. And the judge is going to decide what gets to come in, what evidence gets to go to the jury tomorrow. So we'll have that by tomorrow. But we are going to trial June 2nd for sure.
Wow. So how do you feel? I'm going to ask Scott how you feel now. You've had to wait a long time. How do you feel?
Oh my gosh, I've been waiting for 2 years and 2 months for this day. We filed the lawsuit on April 11th of 23, so 2 years and a month, I should say. And it's the intensity of working this last 2 years. I can't understate it. I'm physically exhausted, mentally exhausted, but at the same time, it is so exciting. We have the chance to set precedent and open the door for thousands, literally thousands of other people. When my wife and I decided to jump into this, we actually said to ourselves, will Grace be the one? And Grace was special. She was special since the day she was born. And God made her a certain way. And I saw his hand on her. Oh my gosh, just today, the defense tried to steer us on a rabbit trail that took 2 hours, and God's hand was in that just today. And I was mentioning before we got on the air that this will be the first medical malpractice battery claim since 1973 in Wisconsin. And so I thought, is there a coincidence with 1973? Or I should say, in God's providence in 1973? And Warner, you can check this out. The code for the Airbnb they are staying in is 1973. Unbelievable.
Wow, that's
Yeah, so
spooky.
God's hand has been on this
Yeah.
case since the beginning.
Yeah.
It is truly a miracle that we were able to file. It's a miracle that the judge has not been bought. He's open-minded to something new. You know, judges don't like to hear something new. And then you have a legal team, which is led by Warner, that is willing to essentially adopt a plaintiff that is as far out as I am, and they adopted me as the fifth member of the legal team. It's fantastic. It's the best day that we have had since Grace's death.
Yeah, I'm not sure my co-counsel thinks I'm leading the team. It's sort of yeah. Let me turn this around for everybody. Here we go. There's
Right, counsel.
Here.
No, but I think the point is actually well taken.
Yeah, blindfold.
You know, we have a great team of lawyers, and you know, I cannot tell you how much everyone has contributed to this, and I'm going to do a special call out to John Fleiter, who's really the one who held this case together all these years and kept us moving forward.
Well, that's great. That's great work. I'm really interested in this setting of the precedent, because I think other people will be watching and they're going to want to know, if you guys win this case, what does that mean for them? What sort of cases now can use yours as a precedent?
Well, I think it does open the door. I mean, I'm going to say an unfortunate fact is many people are past their statutes of limitations in the United States, but there are many cases pending. This will be helpful to all of the cases that are currently pending. And there are still many people that need to look at what happened at the hospital. And I want to go beyond that. These hospital protocols that were instituted under COVID, it's not over. They're still being misused on other illnesses. So this type of case, you know, we need to encourage attorneys to take these. We need to restore informed consent. That's a key issue in this case. We need to restore the doctor-patient relationship, and we need to stop the corporate practice of medicine. And all of that is at issue here in this case. You know, and it's going to be wonderful to get them on the record. Yeah. And I hate to say this, but win or lose, what Scott's doing is incredibly important, because they have to stand there under oath and give their testimony. And we're revealing processes and procedures at the hospital that are actually evil.
Yeah.
So that's going to be very helpful in terms of, you know, the movement to reform medicine in the United States.
Yeah. So my colleague, Natalie, actually interviewed Scott. It's an excellent interview from about a year ago. And in that interview, you guys together went through all the terrible things that happened to Grace. But there might be some people watching today who might know some of the big details, like the DNR thing and the drugs she was given, right?
Yeah, I can run through that real quickly.
Yeah, some of the worst things that happened, some of the things that are important, right?
Yeah, you know, it was basically a combination of drugs that caused a problem. Okay, so Precedex is a drug they give routinely at these hospitals, but it can cause a crisis in a lot of patients. And then you mix that with lorazepam, causes additional problems. And then on the day that she died, they started out with Precedex, had lorazepam, which wasn't even ordered by a doctor, and then hit her with morphine, which killed her. It took her breath away. It literally took her breath away. She couldn't breathe anymore, and she died. That's what they did. On top of that, there was a do not resuscitate order that was entered in the record, not with any approval by the family. It was just done by the doctor. And that do not resuscitate meant that when Grace was failing, and her sister was there at her bedside and realized she was going cold and ran out to get help from nurses who were standing around. There were 30 or 40 nurses standing around right there, not doing anything. She said, I need help. Not a single nurse or doctor in that bullpen lifted a finger to save this girl. And all she needed was a Narcan to reverse the morphine as a start. And then there were some other problems they'd have to deal with. But initially, Narcan would have got her back on the track toward life and would have given her breath back to her. But the morphine took her breath away.
Yeah. And Grace was 19. I mean, this is terrible. And this might shock you, but this DNR thing, we've recently encountered that here in Australia. So you're in Wisconsin, but all the way over here in Australia, I've seen cases of DNRs placed without family permission, without the patient's permission. It's happening.
Yeah, well, they think that they can make a decision. They think that they're God, and they are not. And this will hopefully hold someone accountable for an illegal DNR, basically.
But I'm also interested, Scott, because when you talked to Natalie, you mentioned that you saw some literature that indicated that there was a bias because Grace had Down syndrome, that her life wasn't worth saving. And is that something that's going to come up in the trial at all?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, Elizabeth. I don't believe that will come up in the trial, simply because it doesn't impact whether the doctors and nurses' actions killed Grace. So my personal beliefs regarding the bias are many. The bias towards the fact that Grace had Down syndrome was obvious to me. There were 22 doctors' reports for the 7 days Grace was in the hospital. They referenced that Grace had Down syndrome 36 different times. The bias towards Grace being unvaccinated. The COVID expert on the very first day Grace was in the hospital said that, in his report, said that Grace would not be here if she'd been fully vaccinated. Just last week, I was working with Attorney Fleiter on the records and found that they labeled Grace as a non-VIP patient. She was not a VIP patient. So, there's biases in the records. Most of those things are never going to come into the trial because we're trying to be laser focused on the trial to win.
Yeah.
So you can't bring in the kitchen sink when you're trying to be laser focused. And, the attorneys have done a fantastic job of educating me on what we need to be able to do to win. So, all those things that I just brought up are relevant to me personally as Grace's dad. But that does not mean they're going to be brought in at the trial.
Yeah, I got to say something else that came out here recently. They hid the medical records from us. So we had a set of medical records, and then at the very last minute, we got a brand new set of medical records with additional records in there. So they were hiding the ball all along, and that's typical in these cases. So, for all the attorneys out there, they need to, be aware. Every time you request a set of medical records, it's a different number. One set may have 1,000 records. Another set may have 1,300. And in this case, they hid an additional 58 records, which they present to us just weeks before trial.
What about tampering of medical records? Have you been able to uncover where they've tampered with them?
Honestly, I mean, to me, this is tampering of records. Absolutely.
Yeah.
They hid the ball on us, and we're looking at those closely right now to see what we need to do with those records. We may have a basis to exclude those records. They may actually be helpful for us, but we got to figure it out before we go to trial and decide what we want to do. It's our option now. I think if we wanted them excluded, we could probably get them excluded. This is bad behavior by opposing counsel.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm not a lawyer, but you just raise that in front of the judge because it doesn't make them look very good. We've seen tampering of medical records here, by the way. I've seen straight up. So where drugs have been removed from the record that were given. So, yeah. Is there anything else you want to bring up about today? What happened today?
I don't think so. I'm very happy. This was the best outcome possible today. I'm hoping we have an equally successful tomorrow and then an equally successful trial starting on June 2nd. And I do want to tell your viewers, this is going to be live streamed, we think. We're going to be arguing about tomorrow. So everybody in the world will be able to watch the trial. I think, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't CHD TV going to carry it?
Yeah, CHD-TV has agreed to live stream it. So part of the last piece of what the judge will hear tomorrow, he calls it the bucket of miscellaneous items. So the live streaming the trial is in that miscellaneous bucket. So there should be absolutely no reason the trial can't be live streamed. That's my First Amendment right. It's a public trial. But we haven't won that yet. So he put it specifically on the agenda because it was brought up last week by a media request. So we'll see. We're going to find out that tomorrow.
Yeah, because Mary Bowden's trial was live streamed on CHD.
Right.
Dr. Mary Bowden.
Yeah. Well, they're slow moving and they're kind of boring at times, but I think this one will have some very key moments and some very good testimony at different times.
Did you say this was a jury trial? I can't remember. Is that what you said?
Yes, jury trial 12, jury of 12.
Jury of 12. Well, that'll be interesting. That'll be I'm glad it's a jury trial because, what jury could sit there and listen to this information and not want justice? That's incredible. So, jury selection will be interesting.
Jury selection is going to be very interesting. I mean, the problem with juries, though, is remember, healthcare is a huge employer in every single community. So always see jurors with connections to healthcare.
Yeah, but I think if you were connected to healthcare, you will want this righted. Maybe I'm a bit naive. I know you're going to laugh at me, but I would want this righted, right? So I just got to ask one question. This VIP thing you just said, non-VIP, do you have any more information about that? Because that's horrific. Patients classified as VIP?
My view of it, it's a common practice. They identify people who they're going to take better care of who are coming in. So say you're a business leader or a politician or an executive, they're going to take better care of you than the regular person. And then Grace being Down syndrome, that's just pure discrimination.
But this is not a call center. I mean, I know they have that process in call centers, incoming callers, but this is a hospital that's just crazy. I don't think people are aware of that at all. It's a very ugly side.
Well, I don't think they are. Yeah, it's a great question, Elizabeth. I'm going to plug our own website because I wrote a Substack on it last week, and people can link to it at ouramazinggrace.net. In the upper right-hand corner is a subscription to our newsletter, and that's my Substack. And I wrote a Substack on the lack of Grace being a VIP last week. So I'd really like your listeners to go to that Substack and subscribe.
Yeah, we'll definitely list that. Okay. Well, thank you for your time. Very exciting. I'm looking forward to this June 2 case. And
nice to see you.
I am too.
Yeah, I bet you are. Thank you.
Right. You're welcome. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye, Elizabeth. God bless you.
Bye-bye.